there. I just wanted to pop in and give a quick video update and testimony on some things that have been going on and are going on in our family. As most of you know, in 2020, we lost a son, and his name was Colton Judah Wright. We lost him last summer. We found out in January of 2020 that we were pregnant with our 7th child. And soon after the beginning of that pregnancy, we found out that he was diagnosed with an abnormality called trisomy 18, which usually is not compatible with life. And we prayed and prayed that we would be allowed to meet him alive, but he was stillborn last summer. And there were times that I just sort of had to cry out to God in my anger and my misunderstanding of just how everything works. But looking back now, I can see how God truly carried us through that very, very rough time. And we're not completely through the valley of the shadow of death. I think that losing a child is something that you will deal with forever. And the lessons that we have learned about being close to God's heart through suffering have been just some of the most formative things that I've ever gone through in my life. Most of you also know that I love missions, and I love being able to fly to different places and work especially with children and orphans all over the world. Because of COVID and everything going on in the world, we were not able to make a trip in 2020 at all to any of the countries that we've been working with. So we are really excited that we have a trip planned for the end of September and the beginning of October of 2021. Now, we know that because of the way the world is, there's a possibility that we won't be able to get there, but we are praying that God will open the doors and that we will be able to get there and do what we feel God has for us at this trip in this time. What we're really excited to do is go to a very small village that we visited last time we were in Kenya in 2019 that was completely decimated by the AIDS virus only about 15 years ago. And in this town, most of the people in the entire town were wiped out except for the older people, the widows especially, and the very young children. Now the town is starting to rebuild, but still there's a big age gap between the older and the younger people. And many of these widows are left to care for their young grandchildren whose parents died due to the AIDS virus. We were able to take a walk around the Kenyan countryside and visit some of the bomas, which is the African word for, not African, the Swahili word for home. We were able to visit some of these widows in their homes, and they just welcomed us in and invited us and just were so full of joy to have us visiting. And as we were there and we fell in love with each of them that we got to meet, we started to see that most of their homes are very unsafe. They are made of mud and packed dirt, and when it rains, obviously the mud just gets wetter and wetter and wetter, and during the rainy season it just starts to crack and it never gets dry, and so it cracks again. So a lot of these widows are fearful that their homes will just completely collapse on them. So many times they have to evacuate in the middle of the night, in the middle of a rainstorm, and take what they can and go to higher ground. And as we were there, we just really felt the Lord move in our hearts to be able to go back and to build at least one safe home for one of these widows. So part of what we are trying to do as we go back to Kenya in 2021 is raise as much money as we can to build homes for widows. Each home is about $5,000 to $6,000 depending on the size, and our goal is to build at least one, But if the Lord blesses us through donations and partners, we'll be very excited to build as many as we can. So, referring back to my testimony of 2020 and losing our son, Colton Judah, as I was praying and preparing for this trip coming up this fall, I realized that I will be in Kenya on the 1-year anniversary of what was to be Colton's due date. So if he would have survived until his due date, it would be around his 1-year birthday at the beginning of October this year. I started thinking about how emotional that will be and what could I do to mark that for him and for us as a family. So I started praying about it. And then I went to a funeral of a dear friend of mine. And the pastor there was talking about how everyone has a birth date and everyone has a death date. And you have this dash that goes in the middle. And that is what really is important in your life, is how you live and the legacy that you live and the people that are touched by you. And I've always loved that idea. So as I have been pondering this, I was thinking, well, even though Colton didn't get a dash on earth, he still made a mark, and he still made such an impression on our family's lives and other people's lives that were able to pray with us and support us during that time. And so I started praying about ways that I could perhaps make some sort of a lasting legacy for him, something that would remain as a monument, a testimony to how God has carried us through. And I was in the car, and my daughter put on a Hamilton song, Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story. And story is my year word this year. And so it just started to get me thinking more about that concept. Before that, in the musical Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton says, legacy, what is a legacy? It's planting flowers in a garden you may never see. And that's such a beautiful concept. And also the biblical concept of laying down stones, laying down monuments to mark what God has done as a memorial and a testimony to him. And so I started to wonder if perhaps it would be okay for the partners that we work with if we could dedicate a widow's home in my son's name, Colton Judah, and to call it the Judah House specifically, because the word Judah in Hebrew means praise and thanksgiving, and specifically often that the praise goes first in the battle. Back in those days, they would send the musicians out first in the battle so that literally the praise went first. And that's been such a lesson to us in the past year, just to continue praising God through all of it, even when it's a battle. So I prayed about it. I asked my partners to pray about it. And we're so happy to announce that we will be dedicating a house, the Judah House, to our son in the beginning of October, which is his year anniversary of his due date. So I would love to invite you, if that touches your heart and if it's something that you would want to be involved in, to pray about donating to the cause. And if you're interested in doing that, if you could go to kimsopendoor.com and click the donate button, and in the notes portion, please just write either my name, Kirsten Wright, or Africa 2021, and that will go to the correct account to help build these permanent, safe homes for widows that will stand, and one will stand as a remembrance to Judah's life. Thank you so much, and God bless you.